Welcome back to Filmonomics at Slated. I'm Steph Paterno, and I had the pleasure a few weeks ago of being invited to come and speak at the American Film Market down in Santa Monica about the future of independent film financing. Now, I am a huge believer in technology and all the transformational capabilities that exist with the internet for helping the average film producer. That said, the truth is that what goes on online is mostly the same thing that goes on offline, albeit with greater transparency, efficiency, and velocity. I like to believe that we simply help you do what you already do, but faster. Now, to prove that point out, we thought it would be great to hear from some experts, specifically some distributors, who could tell us a little bit more and give us some insights on to how they evaluate the industry and what are the current hot projects worth getting behind, as well as how Slated views the market and how complementary they are. So let's watch some clips from our recent Filmonomics talks as well as from AFM.
As silly as this may sound, good is good and that works. So a good story, great cast, obviously a proven director. You will highly unlikely pre-sell anything that has a first-time director. And, and we work in this wonderful business that, even if you have all the best things aligned, you still don't know what you're going to get at the end until the movie's over. So, there's that degree of luck, I guess, which is all the most interesting. But I think that you have to kind of look at it as, I always kind of say, you have different buckets. And at the end, it has to be like this sort of, it has to even out. So if, the director bucket is weak, then your cast bucket or your concept bucket or your budget bucket has to be compensating for it. So, there's no sure thing. But I would say in terms of pre-selling, most buyers won't pre-buy a first-timer unless there was, like a very good producer on board that would, allow them to have all the assurances that they would see the movie at the end of the day.
There's so many different ways to look at this that we went and crunched the data on every single film in existence to look at where the sweet spots are. How do they work at different tier level budgets, different tier level casts, different tier level companies involved. And we're coming back with some fascinating data that, if it was packaged up and presented back to you, paints a very clear story. And that clear story gives you protection and a sense of confidence when you're talking to your investors or your distributor or a sales agent saying, well, I know you guys value Jude Law in France at this level, but honestly, Slated says this, and they have looked at the entire industry, not just your numbers. And I know you're trying, sales agents, of course, are trying to sell you on using them, right? So their numbers look fabulous until you've done the deal, and then the reality hits. So we're trying to create independent, objective data that helps you better ascertain how much money to raise in production and for marketing.
The couple of things I would say is someone who's constantly chasing estimates to get them for proof of concept, such as it were. If I'm an investor, I, as they always say, I'd consider the source. So I want to know who the estimates are from, what their track record's been. If I'm really thinking, if I'm just doing somebody a favor and throwing a little bit of money into something, that's a different story. But if I'm putting a lot of capital to work, frankly, I want to meet with that sales agent.
Well, not only that, but you should call the banks. Call the banks, see if they're bankable. See, do you do business with this company? Yes. Okay. Did they come in on their estimates? Yes. Okay. Great. Okay, that's a good choice.
There's due diligence that can be done, and I actually think David happens to work for one of the better companies, but they're I don't know, what are their they're 400 sales companies, 350 of which you don't really want to know. Honestly,
but the banks are definitely. We always recommend to our producers. We have banking relationships with, 2 or 3 major entertainment banks, and we always say check with our bank, and we would expect you to check with other sales companies' banks to see if whatever their estimates are they delivering on those numbers, and that's a great piece of advice if you can. And banks are actually very accessible, and they'll tell you if a company is bankable or not.
To what extent do you think it's important, or buyers look at who's selling a film and say, I trust that person's taste, I trust that person's track record, and if they say it's good, I'm going to give it more of a shot than if somebody I don't know is.
Strictly the sales agent is what you're
Yes,
saying?
I'm talking
That's
about.
extremely relevant. Of course, that's extremely relevant. I mean, people will get you different price in different territories based on the relationships. Yeah, I mean, it is a relationship business. So and the amount of weight you carry as a company will enable you to get a certain type of buyer in the door, and that obviously is very relevant. So if you go with a smaller company that doesn't have the big fluffy movies to sell to the biggest buyers, then chances are these guys won't come in the door. So your pool of buyer all of a sudden shrunk.
I mean, the more momentum you show, that's usually the name of the game. And even the smartest investors in Silicon Valley will never admit that they all follow momentum. Okay, the smartest investors in the world, 90% of their due diligence is done when someone they really trust is participating in a deal. The other 10% is you analyzing charts, but usually that adds up to very little.
Now, the language we may be using might be different, but we're talking about the same common things. Number one, momentum building, verification, market intelligence, and good old-fashioned salesmanship. In the end, nothing really quite has an impact with an investor as your enthusiasm and your full belief in what you're doing. So that X factor is critical no matter what. No amount of data, no amount of clever, efficient tools will quite get you there without the salesmanship. Now that applies whether offline or online, or whether using just human intuition sources or data crunching. You need in the end a hybrid of both to be as successful as possible. Now for all of you that participated at AFM and asked to see the presentation, I'm happy to say that we will be providing an edited version of the presentation. I say edited because it seems like it was an hour and a half talk, and it might be much better to have it a little bit more compact, but we will make that available on the site for you. Until then, subscribe. See you around.